Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex, coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of... This weekend, my best friend Connie has returned as my guest. And you might remember her from when we reviewed We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson, and when we reviewed My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. Which, by the way, thanks to My Best Friend's Exorcism, that book prompted us to read and review this weekend's book, which is My Sweet Audrina by V.C. Andrews. And how that came about was, as Connie and I were fanboying and fangirling over that book, I had noted to her how the two best friends in My Best Friend's Exorcism had buddy read My Sweet Audrina, which Connie admitted that she had never read Andrews before, so I decided now was the perfect time to go in and break her in. But without me rambling on anymore, let's go in and welcome back Connie and see what's been new with her.
Hey guys, I'm so glad to be back and ready to dive into My Sweet Audrina. I've been doing pretty good. Just been busy at work and home in my yard. Been redecorating my bathroom. That's been really fun. And that's been pretty much it in my world.
Awesome. Well, I really enjoyed reading this book with you and all of the discussions that we had on the characters because that was just so much fun.
Oh yeah, me too. It's been so great.
It really has. Well, now that we're caught up to date, let's go to White Fern and see what kind of shit has hit the fan this time.
Yes.
My Sweet Audrina by V.C. Andrews is about a young girl by the name of Audrina Aldair who lives with her family in a Victorian mansion called White Fern. And within the mansion, time is irrelevant as there are no calendars and all clocks are set at different times. However, this isn't the strangest of going-ons at White Fern.
As Audrina's family lives secluded from the village, there is a family plot on their property. Among the graves is a tombstone that belonged to a previous daughter of the Adairs, who is also named Audrina. Upon their visits, the father warns the living Audrina to never enter the woods, because being alone in the woods is how the first Audrina was murdered.
Then, as the story progresses, we become introduced to more bizarre moments. One of which is when Audrina's father forces her to rock in the same rocking chair that belonged to her dead sister so she can become filled with the gifts of the first Audrina. And upon him grooming her into a replica of the first, he hopes to regain the perfect daughter.
But as the years pass, a murderer stalks the halls of Whitefern as a cat-and-mouse game unfolds. And as the body count rises, Audrina is faced with the jaw-dropping secrets of her family's past.
My Sweet Audrina was released in 1982, and until 2016, upon the release of White Fern by Andrews' ghostwriter, this was her only standalone novel. In an interview conducted by Twilight Zone magazine in 1983, it was revealed that prior to My Sweet Audrina being released in hardback, Andrews' previous 3 books had only been released in paperback, which was a decision made by her editor, whereas Andrews wished all of her books would have had the hardback treatment. While Andrews preferred to branch out into other genres, she was unable to spread her wings due to her publisher wanting her to only focus on thrillers as they made money. Incident-wise, Andrews was inspired to write the staircase scenes in My Sweet Audrina due to her own fall down a flight of stairs. Upon her fall, Andrews tore her membrane and long bone. Since doctors believed she wasn't in pain, they sent her home, causing her injuries to heal improperly. This led to her severe arthritis and her eventual need for a wheelchair.
Fun facts! Here are some things you may not know about V.C. Andrews and how inspirational Audrina is. V.C. Andrews hated interviews as she considered them to be an invasion of privacy. Also, although Andrews hated the word horror and considered herself to write psychological thrillers, she admitted that while growing up, she loved scary stories. Plot-wise, Andrews explained that she wrote about situations that don't come up in our everyday lives, and while she said she wasn't fascinated with children, she explained she was just telling a story about children from their viewpoint. Among her works, My Sweet Audrina has remained a strong and influential story. In 1987, it influenced the song Audrina by the Sydney band Toys Went Berserk. Then in 2001, it influenced the song Audrina My Sweet by the Norwegian band Ancient. And in 2016, the novel was adapted into a Lifetime movie.
Now that we have that covered, it's time to move on to the spoilers segment. And if you've never read this book before, we're about to reveal some things that could ruin the experience for you. So if you wish to skip this segment, just scroll down and you'll see that I have a pinned comment at the top of all the other comments, and within that pinned comment, you'll see a timestamp. If you click that timestamp, it will direct you away from the spoilers and bring you to the thoughts section. Mm-hmm. Now, you only have 17 seconds to do this. So, ready, set, go! Since everyone's had the opportunity to click away, we would like to talk about a few moments that we will never forget.
For me, the miscarriage scene is probably the only time I kind of felt bad for Vera. Mm-hmm. I mean, she is troubled, she's psycho, she's bad.
That's a brutal scene.
Yeah, she's 16 years old. She's 16. And at this point, she has become pregnant with her piano teacher's baby. And on this particular day, Vera is being her normal nasty self, fighting with Audrina. And then she starts to go after Sylvia.
Which is a big mistake.
Big mistake. In an effort to prevent Vera, Audrina gets physical and Vera ends up getting hurt and begins to bleed. Audrina starts to get scared. She's really starting to get frightened because it's bad.
Yeah, it's like a lot of blood and stuff.
Right. So she's scared. So she calls her Aunt Elspeth, to come quick. Vera's hurt. Vera's bleeding. Come quick. When Elspeth finally gets up there, Vera's freaking out. She is freaking out. She is scared. She's screaming, "My baby, my baby." And Elspeth, what does she do? She tells her to clean it up.
And leaves her be.
Leaves her to it. Clean it up. This is your 16-year-old daughter who's just experienced a horrible trauma for anybody. And you can't muster up even an ounce of sympathy, of love to help her.
That's brutal as
hell. Cold. It's cold. I mean, Vera's vile. She's terrible. She's a lot of things. Vera deserved karma.
We'll never forget that scene.
Never. But Vera didn't deserve that.
No.
Next is the wedding night, because it was probably the real turning point for me that really let it sink in that something ain't quite right with Arden.
He's a bastard.
He's a creep. Now, the whole evening leading up to that night, and their whole relationship really.
Yeah.
Arden knew that sex made Audrina uncomfortable. And the thing is, he knew why.
Yep. All the way.
He knew. So Audrina goes and gets Sylvia settled. Then she goes in the bathroom to get ready. She goes in there, she takes a long bath, does her hair, her makeup, and Arden immediately starts getting aggravated because it's taking too long. Taking too long for him. So eventually he goes and breaks down the door. And as soon as he gets in, he just starts pouncing on her. And he can see that she's scared, but he just chalks it up to wedding night jitters, and everyone feels that way.
This scene really shows how even your spouse can rape you.
Mm-hmm. So he basically forces this up on her, just acting like she's really into it. And to make matters worse, even though he can see she's scared to death, to make matters worse, it starts storming outside, which is one of her triggers. Seriously, this fool knows what happened to her and why she feels that way, and that she never got the help that she needs. But he just goes on ahead and does what he wants to satisfy his own selfish needs. It really just shows you what an a-hole he really is and how inconsiderate he is.
A male chauvinist pig.
Yes.
The first moment I would like to talk about is when Vera tries to kill Audrina and frame Sylvia for her death. Now, prior to this, what had happened was Vera had tried to kill Audrina by pushing her down the stairs, but instead this only puts Audrina in a coma where she eventually becomes a little coherent, but she's still not able to function. And during this time, she not only discovers that Vera has been banging Arden, but she plans to kill Audrina, drain Damien's bank account, then marry Arden and put Damien and Sylvia in a home.
Yep.
Also, to get away with murder, what she plans to do is she plans to take this little bag of cookies and tie it to the plug that's keeping Audrina alive. That way, Sylvia will pull the plug trying to get the cookies, which in turn will kill Audrina. Y'all, this scene was so damn intense.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, had Audrina not been as well off as what she was,
Yep.
and Sylvia not as smart as what people gave her credit for, then Vera totally would have got in her way and she would have got away with murder.
Yep.
Also, the whole moment where Sylvia had taken Audrina and hid her in the playroom, this totally played out like a good old-fashioned cat and mouse game, and it just honestly kept me on the edge of my seat from start to finish.
Yeah.
The final moment I would like to talk about is the grand reveal when Audrina was begging Damien to tell her the truth about her past. And after pressing him, he does reveal that the original Audrina had been raped on her 9th birthday. And due to this going down, Lucetta ended up having like a temporary lapse of insanity where she gave the original Audrina this horrible scrub down in a bath of just scalding water, which due to this treatment, it caused Damien to hate his wife.
Mm-hmm.
From here, Audrina became a person who didn't want to eat, sleep, go out, and she also grew to be a person who hated men. Then Damien reveals the big kicker, which is the living Audrina is the only Audrina, and the grave that's in their family plot is an empty grave. All it is just a tombstone with the name Audrina Alder on it. And pretty much, this is when we discover that the living Audrina is the one who had been raped, and then she had ended up forgetting everything. And in the process, like, he had taken her to a therapist where she received electroshock therapy, and then he tried to groom her into forgetting everything so she could return to the person she was.
Yeah.
But eventually, Audrina forced herself to forget, which took like 17 months to successfully do. Holy gaslighting, Batman. This whole ending, I mean, it really blew my mind. And first off, I think it was a good sign of the times because the book takes place in the 60s and 70s, back when, I guess, like, electroshock was the go-to rather than actually receiving beneficial therapeutic help.
Yeah.
And also, I noticed how even though Lucetta and Damien were not saints whatsoever, this really made me feel like they were just as scared and confused and damaged as Audrina.
Yeah.
And I honestly think that they did the best they could, even though it was not the right thing to do.
Right.
Now, I will say this. I honestly did think from the beginning of the book that Audrina's grave was empty. But I didn't think that the original Audrina was the one who was living as Audrina.
Yeah.
I actually thought the original Audrina would have been Vera.
Yeah, I thought that at one point,
I mean, she even says, I'm the original Audrina, but she just does that because she's a bitch.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I was like, okay, well, it would make sense that Vera was the original because she hates Audrina so much.
Yeah, with the passion.
Yeah, so this curveball, major kudos to Andrews for throwing this because I honestly did not see this ending coming.
No.
We would like to take this opportunity to bitch. And first off, I would like to bring into the spotlight that little self-centered bastard Arden.
Yeah.
So, at first, I really thought he was cool.
Me too!
I mean, I thought that he was going to be Audrina's knight in shining armor.
I did too.
But as the book progresses, he ends up raping Audrina on their wedding night. He cheats on Audrina with Vera. And then we discover that he was an onlooker when Audrina was raped as a child. So, after discovering all of this, I learned that he was nothing more than just a puddle of dog vomit. And truth be it, he really deserved to be with someone like Vera because, she was like Satan's asshole, so they would have been a match made in hell.
Mm-hmm. The first one I would like to talk about is Vera. Vera is the most horrible character in the book. Let's review. She orchestrates Audrina's rape. She constantly torments Audrina so Vera can make her feel like she's the good one. She sleeps with Audrina's husband. She pushes her down the stairs, tries to kill her in a coma, while blaming poor Sylvia. And I'm not completely convinced that the music teacher's death was a suicide like Vera claims it was. It's suspicious. And yes, Vera was a tortured soul who never knew love from anybody, especially her parents. But come on, girl, you got out! Go get some therapy and let that go. And Vera was definitely a product of her environment and lack of love. Either that or she was just born bad, or both. But at least in the end, one good thing you can say, at least Vera told the truth in the end about her fall before she died, instead of throwing one of them under the bus. Because it was an accident.
The next asshole I would like to bitch about is Damien. Because even though it seems like he had Audrina in his best interest in trying to restore her to the lovable daddy's girl that she was, in all honesty, he was in this for his own self-gain because he wanted to be worshipped like a god. And the old Audrina worshipped him like a god, so that's what he was wanting. He really didn't care what he put his daughter through. He just wanted to be worshipped like a god, or at least in my opinion, that's how I saw him.
Me too.
Also, at the same time, had he treated Audrina and Vera equally, you know what? Vera might not have become the monster that she was.
Right.
And on top of that, he ends up using Sylvia. Poor Sylvia, who can't do nothing on her own, just the only really pure, innocent person in the book. He uses her to trap Audrina, and he does it successfully.
Yep.
Now, when I first read this, I kind of thought that maybe Damien was a little bit more capable of love than Arden. But the more I think about it, the more I tend to think that everything he did had a hidden agenda.
Yeah.
Like, even though it alludes that he actually does love Audrina, Billy, and Sylvia, it just feels like there's a hidden agenda behind it. Like, for example, with Billy. He knew that Audrina looked up to Billy. And pretty much like if Billy told Audrina to do something,
she did.
Audrina would listen.
Right.
So here's the thing. He gets with Billy, and then Billy starts to tell Audrina, oh, you have the wrong idea about your dad, and she just paints him out to be a saint.
Yep.
So, yeah, I really tend to think that this toxic asshole is incapable of love, and he is just nothing more than a puppeteer who is trying to get everyone to worship him. And truth be it, you know what? If the men in my life were like Arden and Damien, I would choose the life of a masturbating spinster.
Next, I wanted to talk about Elsbeth. First off, she is a horrible mother.
Yeah, she is a mother.
She never gave Vera any kind of love or affection, and you saw that most of all with her reaction to the miscarriage. Vera never needed her mother more than in that moment, and Elsbeth just completely and cruelly dismissed her.
Yeah.
What kind of mother does that? I mean, I hate Vera too, but that was just cold.
I couldn't do that to my kid.
No, not even Vera. And what kind of mother does not go looking for their 16-year-old child? My 16-year-old goes missing. I'll call it the National Guard, the FBI, the CIA, criminal minds, whoever, to get my kid back home safely. Also, Elspeth was a horrible sister. Horrible sister. She was always going on and on about what she did, all she had to do, always threatening to leave. Fool didn't go leave! Pack your bags and go live your best life. Nobody's keeping you away from go. Go. Bye, Felicia.
Don't let the door hit your ass on the way out.
No. Go. Bye. Shut up. But I will give credit where credit is due. She did step up when Lucetta died, and she was there for Audrina.
She really was.
I will say that.
She ended up coming around a little bit. It doesn't excuse what she did in the past, but,
No.
you know, she does deserve a few little kudos, just a little pat on the back.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My Sweet Audrina is a great Gothic horror novel that could also fall into the category of psychological suspense.
Mm-hmm.
And overall, this book really unloads a lot.
It does.
Like, it covers rape, post-traumatic stress disorder, mental and physical abuse, as well as mental and physical disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Also, overall, the cast was very well developed, and they all had some really interesting backstories.
They did.
First off, the orchestrated rape scene felt really Shakespearean to me. And for those of you who have read Shakespeare's Titus Andronicus, I'm sure you'll understand the comparison I'm making between this and the rape of Lavinia. And although Lavinia was raped due to revenge, it really feels like the rape in My Sweet Audrina was driven out of jealousy. And, you know, revenge could be a motive as well.
It could have been.
Now, I wish I could elaborate a little bit more on this, but we've already covered this in the spoiler section.
Yeah, the rape in the book was hard for me on an emotional level. I mean, the rape of anyone at any age is hard, but when it's a kid, it makes it that much harder. And the brutal rape of a 9-year-old and a gang rape at that in the woods of a 9-year-old is unconscionable.
It is. As far as PTSD is concerned, I think this book does a good job on bringing awareness to how simple subjects can trigger people who have suffered trauma. And the thing is, these acts can be subjects that everyday people take for granted. Like, for example, with this book, the simple act of lovemaking can be horrific.
Yeah, this book really highlighted PTSD, and you see it lingering throughout, but it really reached critical mass in the honeymoon scene, and that was just heartbreaking.
It really was.
It was awful.
Just, you know, it really made you be a fly on the wall in that scene. As far as gaslighting is concerned, my damn, this is like the mother of all gaslighting books.
It is.
And I swear, if anyone were to ever ask me to give them an example of what gaslighting is, I would simply hand them this book and say, read. Because, seriously, like at some point, everyone except maybe 2 or 3 characters is guilty of gaslighting. And Damien is totally the worst because he's this main orchestrator and everyone just follows his lead.
Right, there is so much gaslighting in this book. I mean, you see the way Audrina's family messes with the clocks, the calendars, her birthdays. They won't allow her to go to school or have a social life. The story about the original Audrina, the way Damien made Audrina rock in that chair to gain Audrina's special gift. And also, Arden is guilty of gaslighting Audrina too with his quest for sex.
Big time, and
especially trying to blame her for his affair and the way he acted on the wedding night. And the list just goes on from there.
It really does. Then we have the physical and mental abuse that run throughout this book, which, due to all of the different forms of abuse that go down at White Fern, the house eventually just feels like a negative cesspool, where one negative action just leads to a greater negative action, and so on and so forth. And also, it seems like with Vera, for example, she starts to see things like a game, and it feels like she starts to approach this in a sense of who can hurt who more. So I totally think the book stands as a warning that if you live in a toxic environment, then you need to remove yourself at once and not look back.
Yeah, there is a lot of mental and physical abuse in the book. Damien is often physically and mentally abusive toward Vera. He also gets physically abusive with Lisetta the night before she goes into labor with Sylvia.
Yep.
And to me, he is mentally abusive with Audrina with his mind games and manipulations. It's a tough subject, but also not one we can shy away from, especially when reading this book.
As far as physical and mental disabilities are concerned, we have examples of brittle bone disease with Vera, and we also see how diabetes affected Billy, which those are just side items to the main subject that comes into play, which it starts to focus on how Sylvia has a mental handicap. And by the way, I totally hated how Sylvia was sometimes treated by Audrina. But at the same time, Audrina was a child who was trying to raise a special needs child.
Yep.
And she had no guidance on this whatsoever.
Nope.
So I did really feel sorry for that circumstance. But also, I would like to make note that in regards to Sylvia, this is the only time that the book felt dated with its language, because there were quite a few times where she was called the R word nonchalantly. And the thing is, sometimes it was meant as an insult, other times the context wasn't intended to be hurtful. And I had to remind myself that this book takes place in the 60s and the 70s, and it was written in the 80s. Which, from my understanding, not until 2010 did Rose's Law make it aware of how hurtful that word was, but it still made my toes curl.
I agree, and like you said, special needs children are focused on in the book. But instead of receiving the best care possible, Sylvia is used as a pawn to trap Audrina. And Audrina really does the best she can to care for Sylvia. But it also brings awareness to how someone Audrina's age can resent someone like Sylvia. But regardless, Audrina really does eventually learn and grow to love Sylvia and protect her to the best of her ability. She really does.
She does. I think she does really good with that. And she grows to love her as a daughter. Character-wise, Andrews provided us with a cast of realistic characters. And the thing is, there were times in this book where I honestly felt bad for all of the characters, even the most vile ones. Like, I think the main reason why this was because Andrews provides us with characters that are painfully human.
Right.
Like, there were times where I would be like, oh, God, Damien is such a bastard. Then I was like, oh my God, but I feel so sorry for him under the circumstance.
Right.
And then there were other times where I'm like, oh my God, Vera is such an asshole. And then I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe she just went through that. I feel so bad for her.
I know.
So because of that conflict, I really do think that Andrews played with our emotions very well. And she was an author who knew how to really just make people have mixed emotions.
Right. Yeah, there is a lot of great character development in this book, but we see Audrina go from this sweet, innocent little kid into this strong, willful young woman. Even Damien has some development. He goes from being this kind of this domineering tyrant figure to someone who has a little bit more compassion. And we kind of see that because it seems like he's regretful with how he handled things with Audrina. But I think Elspeth probably had the most character development and probably, to me, the most complicated character in the book. And nothing is more complicated or more different than her treatment of Vera and Audrina. That's just it. And you see her go from this miserable old woman to someone who's a little bit more compassionate, a little bit more protective. And then you see Arden go from this sweet little boy who loved and helped his mother to basically being a carbon copy of Damien.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see the journey that these characters took. Overall, my Sweet Audrina didn't scare me, but it did hold me in suspense from beginning to end. And because of how White Fern was described and the negativity that went on behind its walls, this honestly felt like a ghost story without a ghost. Also, this was an extremely intense book, and after I finished reading it, I had to just put it down and not read anything for a few days so I could just process all of the crap that went down.
Yeah, it really didn't scare me either, but due to how it was written, I just got sucked into the story and just became a part of their intense world.
I highly recommend My Sweet Audrina, as it was an awesome Gothic horror novel that felt fast-paced and it kept me guessing from beginning to end. Also, if you're interested to see how domestic horror blends with Gothic horror, this book is a perfect example as it shows how characters, scenario, and a creepy setting can blend together for a perfect chiller.
I would highly recommend my Sweet Audrina. By how well the characters were written and developed, I could not put it down. And the plot twist kept me guessing at every turn. This is a definite favorite of mine.
On to the questions. My first question is, what is a horror book you would recommend about family? My next question is, since my Sweet Audrina is primarily found in the horror section, but is also considered a psychological suspense book, do you think that psychological suspense is a subcategory of horror? Why or why not? Personally, it just really depends on the book because there's been a few times where I've read psychological suspense books and I'm like, okay, well, this feels like it belongs in horror.
Mm-hmm.
Other times, not so much. Like Mary Higgins Clark, for example, she is primarily mystery and suspense.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, some of the ideas might be horrific, like kidnappings and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not to the point where it's horror.
Right.
But then we have other books like My Sweet Audrina or Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, and those are books that I feel do actually belong in the horror category. And it's not so much because they're Gothic books, it's more so because those books are written in a way where they feel like ghost stories without a ghost.
Mm-hmm.
So it honestly just depends.
I agree. I think another good psychological suspense book that can kind of fall into the horror category is Dolores Claiborne.
Yeah, Dolores Claiborne was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
That was pretty awesome.
It was. I love that movie. Also, I think Silence of the Lambs is another good example of a book that can be psychological, suspense, and horror.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
We need to read and review that one day.
We do.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's our review. We hope you enjoyed it. And before I continue on with the video, I would just like to tell Connie that I really appreciate her reading this book with me.
Thank you.
And it was fun to have her back on.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, hopefully this won't be the last time. As a matter of fact, I know it won't be the last time
Yay!
because right now we're buddy reading Mexican Gothic.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that'll come in the near future.
Yes.
So, anything else you would like to say to the viewers, Connie?
Thank you. I was so happy to be back, and I can't wait to see y'all next time.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Before I close out my video, like how I usually do, I would just like to take this opportunity to say thank you for your thoughts and prayers, because as many of you know, my grandmother had been hospitalized over this last week. And as a matter of fact, she's still in the hospital now. She's probably going to have an extended stay there due to a really awful UTI, and also her blood pressure has been going up quite a bit. So they've been concerned about her having a stroke. And there's just really a lot going on with that. So I really do appreciate those thoughts, prayers, good vibes. Please keep sending them, and just thank you from the bottom of my heart. But now I would like to close out the video, which first off, I would like to say thank you to Lisa G. And I would also like to thank J.L. Mulvihill, which J.L. Mulvihill is a young adult steampunk fantasy author, and her books are available in print, ebook, and audio wherever books are sold. Also, I would like to thank Melody Romeo, which Melody Romeo is a historic fiction and fantasy author, and her books are available in print and ebook wherever books are sold. Also, I would like to say thank you to Nicholas Gray, which Nicholas Gray is a horror author, and his books are available in print and ebook, and a few in audio wherever books are sold. Also, I would like to say thank you to Lisa Shin, which Lisa Shin is an awesome artist, and her Facebook profile showcases her artwork, so be sure to check that out, which her profile is The Art of Shin, so definitely check out all of those amazing creators. And last but not least, I would like to thank my mom and grandma. And if you're wondering why I'm giving a shout out to these wonderful people, it's because they've had the opportunity to contribute to my Patreon account. And if you would like to contribute as well, there's a link to my Patreon in the description section of this video, where for $5 a month, I'll give you a shout out at the end of my videos. And if you're a creator, I'll tie to your name what it is you create. Also, I have a $10 tier where you'll still receive those $5 benefit shoutouts and everything, but I also do creative photography on the side with like creepy artwork and everything. So at the beginning of every month, I'll send you over a photo, and once you receive that, you can print it off, do whatever you like. And if you're able to do this, that's awesome. If not, no sweat. All I hope is you can return to this channel so we can continue to have a good time together. And if you would like to hunt me down on social media, links to my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok are all in the description section of this video. And if you've yet to subscribe, be sure to subscribe to this channel and click the notifications bell, because I have more book reviews coming in the near future. So until we see each other again, I hope you have a great week and sweet nightmares.